Hey guys, it's Zach from the Concon channel, and in this video I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on the new roguelite Hyperlight Breaker. So the first tip that I have for you guys is at the start of every new cycle, there will be a skeleton that you can obtain equipment or gear from before entering the Overgrowth. Now there'll also be dead bodies or skeleton type of looking bodies, as you can see, which will be located on the map with icons either showing that there will be guns, which are called the rails, or melee weapons, which are called blades, as well as the equipment icon, so be sure to check them out. Now different biomes have various enemies, and you should keep your eye out for the enemies and mobs that have these three feather-like indicators above their heads, which represents the type of elemental damage they do. They are usually in different colors to show which elemental damage they are doing, and they are a lot stronger than the typical enemy without them. This is important because towards the mid to late game of your cycle, you will get synergies with different equipment of the same elemental type, which will give you a greater damage output, allowing you to take out these enemies quicker. When collecting resources, whether you die or extract, you'll keep the same amount of resources that you had collected in your run. The only things that you do lose are weapons and gear if they have a certain amount of durability slots left. So for example, if you pick up an item that has one durability slot and you die, you will lose that weapon. Whereas some weapons can have 3 durability slots, so then after you die, you'll have 2 left. But if you manage to extract with the weapons, you won't lose any durability slots. So just make sure to check the durability of the weapons and items you choose, and then make a decision based on that, whether you want to continue or extract, so that you don't end up losing a gun that you really enjoy using. So the next tip that I'm going to give you is about Bright Blood and how to get it. Now, if you look in the top right hand corner, Bright Blood is currently the currency in the top right, with obviously the blood looking symbol, and I have 400 of it. Now you use Bright Blood to progress through the game, such as unlocking certain chests and just getting equipment and things like that. You'll notice that you'll need to use Bright Blood for a lot of things you purchase, so it is quite an important currency to get and have. Now once you start a run, you'll have 0 Bright Blood. Now you can get Bright Blood in many ways, being from defeating small enemies, which gives you a little bit of Bright Blood, as well as destroying destructible objects such as boxes and even some rocks. You'll see that there will be various different destructible objects you can just hit and they will give you some Bright Blood. And then you can also defeat the larger, bigger enemies, which gives you a little bit more Bright Blood than the smaller ones, and obviously from defeating bosses and collecting stashes. And then lastly, if you go to one of the vendors, interact with them, and go to the box symbol with a minus sign, you can then sell your items as well for some Bright Blood. As you can see, if we sell this Plasma Edge Holobite, we'll get 90 Bright Blood. Now the next tip that I have for you is the Ruin activation points. These are essentially the points where you can spawn, and there is multiple of them around the map. In order to activate them, you'll just need to go up to the ruin. They look like this purplish structure, and you'll just need to activate it. Now they can also be spotted on the map, and they will be labeled as a shrine on the map. So if you see that, it is probably going to be the ruin activation point. Now once you activate a specific one, and you either extract or you die, in your next run, you'll then spawn by that most recently activated ruin. So you'll see that in this clip, I activate the ruin and I extract successfully, and then when I start my next run, I spawn exactly where that ruin was that I recently activated. Now this is a good tip, because if you are fighting a boss, or if you are in an area where there is, for example, loot that you need or want to get, and you don't want to have to spawn at a ruin that is so far away, you can just activate the ruin that is nearby. If you end up dying, or if you extract because things are getting too hectic, you can then just respawn in that same area, go and collect the loot you wanted to get previously, and extract again right by that ruin. Now vendors can be found in the Overgrowth, and they can show up on the map with the vendor indicator symbol. Now, for some reason, my symbol is kind of in the way, but if you get a gist of it, it kind of looks like the vendor from the main hub. Now, once you find this vendor, you can then go ahead and interact with him, and he'll actually sell you some equipment and gear. Now, you can buy this gear for Bright Blood, but obviously, when starting a new run, you'll start with 0, so you'll need to go and kill enemies or collect stashes or destroy objects in order to get that bright blood, and then come back to this vendor and then buy the equipment off him. Now, the reason I find this useful is because sometimes the vendor may have really good items, so it's always best to go and check out the vendors in Overgrowth to see if they have an item that will help you on your run. Another tip that I have for you is to not spam your abilities. In this game, you are quite vulnerable when using abilities, as because when you are in your animations, you are still able to get hit by the enemy, although you might be doing a dash or you might be using one of your 2 special moves, you can still get hit. So if you're on low HP, try and save your special attacks for when there is a clear opening and you know that you're not. Like you can see in this clip, if we just run it back, I do my special attack that is quite a long animation, and that flying enemy shoots me with its ball, and while the animation is still going and I cannot move because obviously the animation is happening, I get hit by the attack of the flying enemy. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So obviously, once you get good at the game and once you start understanding how enemies fight and the mechanics, you then should try and use your abilities to the best situation that you can. Now, the next tip that I have for you guys in the early stages of the game is to go out and explore the map, collect gear and items, avoid combat, and then extract. The reason I say this is because this game is not very forgiving. You start off in the map, and you may even just spawn on top of enemies when you start. Not only that, but enemies can see you from so far away, you don't even need to be engaging with them and they will just start attacking you. Enemies will also just spawn on you as time goes by, and you could literally just have fought a bunch of enemies with low HP now, and then you just get spawned on top of with more enemies. So I recommend when you're starting the game, you don't really have a lot, so just try and get the gear and extract as soon as possible, and it'll set you up for your future runs, because at the beginning of the game it is very punishing and it does get quite annoying. So don't try and just fight enemies, just go for the loot instead and get out as soon as possible. Now, I've been using the word cycle quite a lot in this game, but just to explain what a cycle is, a cycle pretty much consists of 4 lives or 4 chances. Now, after a death, you lose a chance, so therefore if you're on 4 out of 4 and you die, you'll then be on 3 out of 4 chances left. Now, after every chance, the loot does not respawn, nor does the world, but the enemies will respawn. So essentially, you're going to be playing through those 4 chances, and obviously, if you don't die, you'll keep your chance. Now, the reason this is important is because the longer you stay playing in your cycle, the better the rewards are once your cycle is finished. So once you die 4 times, you'll be sent back to the hub, and you'll go to Pherus Bit, who's standing by the teleporter that sends you to the Overgrowth. Once you go to him, you're going to need to pay in order to regenerate the world. And once you do this, you'll then regenerate a new world, and that will then respawn the loot, the enemies, and obviously everything inside the world. Now, you don't have to worry about the price of these things. They are going to cost some bright blood and chips, but these are currencies that you get quite frequently in the game. Now, the reason I'm giving you this tip is because you want to try and survive as long as you can in the cycle by obviously being able to extract successfully. Because the longer you stay in the cycle, when you go and regenerate that new world with Pherus Bit, he'll actually reward you for completing the cycle, which is used to unlock most of the items in the game, and they are quite hard to come by. Like I said previously, after you die, you'll be respawned back at the hub next to this teleporter. Now, just in front of this teleporter, you'll find Pherus Bit. Now, this is a very important vendor because if you go to his store, you'll see that he can give you permanent upgrades. Such as in the tier 1, we can extend our hover and glider time by 0.5 seconds. And yeah, that's pretty much the first section on the left. But if we take a look to the right, we'll see that there is going to be this medkit capacity upgrade. Now, this is super helpful in your runs, especially with health being so hard to come by in this game because the Medipak plants literally only give you 5 HP. Now, the reason I say this is because once you get this upgrade, if you collect 3 Medipak plants in a game and bring them back into the hub, it'll then be automatically converted into a Medipak, which will give you all your health back whenever you need it. Now, you can actually replenish your Medipaks during your runs as well. And in order to do this, you need to collect 5 Medigem plants and return to a ruin activation point, which is that purple object structure that I showed you earlier. Now, another thing with the Medigem plants converting into medkits, the more you change the Medigem plants into medkits, the more it's going to essentially cost you. So I recommend getting the Medipak capacity as soon as possible. Now, in order to get them, you'll obviously need golden rashes, which you can get by obviously completing your cycles. Now, there is another way to get golden rations, and this is by finding these secret rooms, which either can be free to enter or you need a key, but they are super difficult as you'll need to defeat a bunch of enemies in a small area. So I don't really recommend doing that in the early stages of the game. Now, keys are quite simple to get. All you need to do is just open literally small containers or stashes in the Overgrowth, and you will have a chance of getting a key. Just make sure once you unlock the Medipak capacity, you must still then install the upgrade. So you'll see we just unlocked it, but now it says that we need to install it. And once you install it, it'll then take up your X slots. Now, the X slots essentially is just a way of the game telling you that you can't run more than one upgrade or level of upgrade per slot. So for example, the Medipak capacity takes 2 slots out of the 3, and these ones all take 1. So if we wanted, we could have 3 of these board energy ones, or we can have 1 of the Medipak one, which takes 2, and then 1 of the board energy. Obviously, you can then add a slot by getting rations, which will then give us a 4th slot. Now you'll see that there are multiple tiers, and in order to unlock these tiers, we need to use our cores. So you can see this one requires 2 cores, and I currently have 3. Now, in order to get cores, you can find stashes marked on the map, and they should give you some cores. You can also get core shards, which is by defeating the prism enemies, which are the enemies marked on the map with the yellow diamond, and from unmarked lootable objects like bone piles. So once you collect those, you can then upgrade your base stats, and you can purchase the tier upgrades from the Pherus Bit, as well as some other unlocks. Now, in order to actually upgrade your base stats, you'll need to come to the teleporter, and when you go and you say pursue, you'll see that you'll be able to upgrade your base stats on the left by your psychom. So if we go here, you'll see that it requires 1 core to upgrade our base stats. So obviously, if we then choose whichever stat we want to upgrade, we can then use our cores to upgrade it. As simple as that. Now, another thing you need to know is that you get 3 vendors you can talk to. Now, the first vendor you have access to for free is Acces, which is the blade vendor. He'll obviously sell you your melee weapons, and you can obviously sell items back to him. Now, in order to get the other vendors, you'll need to pay with chips. Now, in order to get these chips, you need to locate the diamond icon on your minimap. Now, it won't show up on your bigger map when you enter it, or it'll only show on the minimap, at least in my experience. And once you find it, it'll be listed as materials, and this will give you chips once you open it. Now, it may sometimes require bright blood to open, but if not, you can just open it, and as you can see, it gave us 3 materials, which is essentially 3 chips. So once you've collected chips, it's going to cost you 12 chips in order to repair the location of the vendor. So once you repair the location, it'll say this location will be available when you return from your next run. So I've collected 24 now, so I can essentially just get both vendors. As you can see, it's both 12, and now we'll just need to quickly go into a run and come back. As you can see, now that we've returned to the hub, the 2 new vendors are here. So this vendor right here is going to be the rail vendor, which is for guns and weapons essentially. You can obviously upgrade them, and they can give you a few gear upgrades, like as you can see, unlocked gear upgrading, 1 random item, 10% off, plus 2 upgrades, and it's the same for all the other vendors. And then we have this vendor right here, and he's pretty much going to sell you equipment as well as hollow bites. Now, you may have been wondering about the crown bosses, which are obviously these crown symbols with the like skull face on them, and you'll see that there's going to be these diamonds beneath the symbol. Now, in order to actually be able to fight these bosses, what you need to do is defeat these yellow prismed enemies. Now, these enemies are going to be super tough, so you want to be prepared when fighting them. But essentially you have to defeat the yellow symbols in order to fill up these gauges on the crown bosses. So if I defeat these 2 prism enemies, then that means I can then go ahead and fight this crown boss, as it'll fill up 2 of those prisms. And as you can see, we've now collected 2 of the prisms from the yellow enemies, and now we can have access to one of the crown bosses, being this guy. And you just saw the message pop up saying we can access him. Another useful tip is actually caching the equipment or gear that you find throughout the world. Now the way you do this is by going up to obviously the gun, rail or equipment symbol, looting the dead body, and then you'll see there will be an option to cache, and this pretty much just sends all the items to your vault. Now once you start collecting a few items in the game, you'll then be able to use the vault properly, and essentially what this does is it allows you to view all the items that you've put or essentially cached, because obviously you can only carry a certain amount of items on your person. So what you can do is you can view your vault, and then you can select one of these and you can kind of just, you know, sort out your vault. But in order to actually equip those things, you need to modify loadout. And when you go to modify the loadout, you can then click on the character, click on the equipment you want to swap out. And then obviously if you have equipment you can swap out, then of course you can do so. Like as you can see over here, I can swap out the equipment. So that is how you use the vault. I was very confused about that when I first started, but that's how you pretty much use it. Another tip is that you can actually use your hoverboard to go across the water, because you'll notice that if you just fall into the water, you won't actually die, you'll just be respawned to the nearest land. So don't be afraid to fall in the water, and if you do, you can always just use your hoverboard to get out. Now the next tip that I have is to keep an eye on the yellow bar beneath your minimap. The reason I say this is because the bar grows with everything that you do on the map or in your run. What I mean by this is that if you collect gear or any equipment, defeat enemies, or just stay long in your run, the bar will grow, and what this does is it makes the run more difficult. So think of the yellow bar as a difficulty level or scaler. The more filled that the yellow bar is, the harder that your run is going to get. And what essentially ends up happening is you'll get meteor strikes that will start to spawn in, such as this yellow sphere. So inside the sphere, it's going to be a meteor shower, and it'll be toxic, so it'll start killing you. Now, the more that you last and the bigger the yellow bar, the more of these meteor showers, or let's just say these spheres, will start spawning in and taking over the map. Also, enemies will start to spawn on top of you more frequently. Now, it'll get to a point where if you don't leave and the yellow bar is almost full, you'll start getting sent assassins, and these assassins are very tough enemies and they are super persistent, which means they don't really leave you alone until you die. Okay, so the assassin has literally gotten inside of the arena that I'm supposed to be fighting a boss in to extract. So this is fantastic. As you can see, not very forgiving. The assassin literally fought me inside of the extraction zone. So that is why I recommend leaving before the yellow bar gets to 50%. It's been Zach from the Con channel. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and thanks for watching.